All right. Hello, everyone. This is another episode of Fire Breathing Rob. Please like and subscribe our videos on YouTube. We appreciate it. This is Andrea Wilson Woods. She's going to be talking about her new book out, which is Better Off Bald, A Life in 147 Days. And Andrea, thanks so much for coming on the
Yeah,
program.
thank you
Really
so much for
appreciate the
having
time.
me.
So let's go into this. For the viewers that don't know a lot about you and haven't learned about the book or heard about your story, can you just tell a little small synopsis about to the viewers about who
Sure.
you are and what you do?
Well, everything goes back to when I was 22 years old. I got custody of my then 8-year-old sister, Adrian, and I was her only parent and legal guardian. I raised Adrian all through my 20s until one day, 1 month after her 15th birthday, and it was really shocking. She was otherwise physically fine, and her cancer journey only lasted 147 days, hence the subtitle of the book, and that was in 2001. And Adrian died shortly after my 29th birthday, and by the time I was 30 years old, I completely changed the course of my life because her death affected me so greatly as both her sister and her parent. I have a nonprofit dedicated specifically to her type of liver cancer called Blue Fairy. And then most recently, I started a health tech startup called Cancer University.
But how hard was that to adjust your mindset and also your life, taking care of another young person's life at such an
Well, a
early
lot of
age
people
of
think
your
that
life?
I saved Adrian, and I feel like she saved me because I actually graduated from college early and I got into a very bad abusive relationship, and I sort of didn't know where I was going with life. And when I ended up taking custody of Adrian, I had really a renewed sense of purpose because I knew no matter what, at the end of the day, I had to be there for her and I had to be her parent. And in high school, and she was actually born in Alabama, which is where I live now. I recently returned here, and I always joked that I was the housewife because I actually did everything in high school for my mother who was working. I took care of the house, and I wouldn't say I cooked, but I microwaved really well and boiled water really well. But I cleaned. Once I was able to drive, I did all the errands. I took my sister to daycare. I picked her up. I did all of those things. So I was really used to taking care of someone else.
So let me say to this, somebody that, may hear that story, they might say, were you upset that you had to be a parent to Adrian at such a young age? Even like you said, when you were living at home, you had to still cook and clean and do all these things, and you weren't ready for that. So how did that make your sister, of course, and everybody has love for their family, but, how did it make you feel where you were, really that parent at, whatever age you started out as really, being a parent?
Well, when I was younger,
Right.
I didn't know any differently. You know what I mean? I mean, first of all, I'm the oldest. And so there was an expectation placed on me when I was really young that I would take care of my brother and then later Adrian, who's much, much younger. But if you don't know any differently, and so I accepted that responsibility. I didn't really understand what my mother's problems were. I didn't understand that she was a drug addict. She was so highly functional. I mean, I didn't really get it. And it's for her. I knew. And I didn't even think twice about it.
There's got to be a lot of stress with Adrian, dealing with, her mom and those issues with that. And also, you and her, you're not the same age, you're, butt heads. Did she ever talk to you about any of that stress growing up with you said, like you said, with your mom and her dad passing away and how it affected maybe her mental health in general?
Yes, we had, you're correct. We had the same mother, different fathers. Her father died before she was born, so she never had a chance to know him. He died in a car accident. And I didn't really understand how difficult that was for her until high school, middle school, high school, when she did become really severely depressed because, again, it was just, this was our life and this is how it was. But I didn't really understand from her point of view. Her friends had parents and they had moms and dads. And she had her sister, who was her mom, and her sister's boyfriend, who was the only father figure she ever had. And so, I was Sissy, and she called my boyfriend John, his name. So I didn't really grasp how different it was for her until she started struggling with depression. But very early on, when she first came to live with me, we did have this very seminal moment, if you will, and it's in the book where she threw a huge temper tantrum and decided that she was just going to move back to Alabama. Now, keep in mind, she's 8 years old, and it was horrible. And so I bluffed and I called the now defunct Northwest Airlines. And this was back in the day when you call the airlines and you could actually book a flight and they would hold it for 24 hours without a credit card. And so that's what I did. And so I bluffed and said that if she wasn't going to listen to me and follow the rules of my house, then I was going to send her home. But she didn't know that there was no place to go. Like no one else, there was no one else to take care of her. Like she was stuck with me in LA. It was too bad. But she didn't know that. So I bluffed. And I left the room, went to the living room, and I heard her throwing things across the room. And I just knew, like, in that moment, it was so important and advanced that she had to parent. And then came out, said, okay. And I said, okay, what? And she said, okay, I want to live with you. And that was when we established the rule in our house that I was her parent first, then I was her sister, and one day when she was grown up, I wanted to be her friend. But that was the hierarchy of my role in her life. And that was a very important moment for us.
Do you feel like that helped the relationship grow even more because she depended on you, not only, as you said, as a sister, but also a mother figure? With that being said?
Yes, it did. It defined our relationship. It also gave her very strict boundaries, which I believe all kids need boundaries. And she understood what those boundaries were. And she also knew that I loved her no matter what. So even when she screwed up, she knew I loved her.
Did your mom ever come back and say, hey, you know, I'm better now, or hey, I want Adrian to come back and live with me? And if so, how was that handled?
Yeah, so Adrian came to visit me for Christmas vacation. It was supposed to be a 2-week stay in Christmas of 1994. And then the day after Christmas, my mother decided she didn't want Adrian to come home. She didn't want her back. And I told my mom right then and there, I said, if you do this now, I'm not giving her back. I'll fight you for her. Because again, I kind of knew things were not going well, and Adrian was in bad shape and my mother was in bad shape. And 8 months later, my mother did call and say, okay, I want her back now. And I said no. And eventually we went to court, and I sued her for legal custody, and I won.
So is there any relationship anymore between you guys, or that was the end of it after that?
That was the end of it. I haven't spoken to my mother since November 2001, and I haven't seen her since March of 2006 when I testified against her at a federal hearing.
You know, she went to that Coachella concert with your boyfriend, I believe,
Yeah.
and she was there. And then when she came home, she had consistent pains. Or was that day or the day after when, you know, the trouble started to hit where she started to get those pains?
It was 2 weeks later, and John had complained of bruised ribs, and then Adrian had pain Wednesday, May 16th. She had pain, and she had been in the nurse's office all day at school. She didn't want to call me and pull me out of school. I was actually a teacher at the time. And so I came home and found her on the living room floor, curled up in a fetal position, crying. And this was a kid who never cried, and saying that she couldn't breathe. And that's what she was, just clutching her right side, saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And we went to her pediatrician, who didn't like what he saw, who sent us to the local hospital. We lived in Burbank, California. So Burbank itself is actually a fairly small town. There's one hospital. And they thought, based on Coachella and what Adrian told them, that perhaps she had some sort of internal bleeding. They gave her something for the pain. They do a CAT scan. And finally, when the CAT scan results come back, the doctor comes in and he doesn't look at Adrian. And so I knew whatever he was about to say was far worse than internal bleeding, because he didn't look at her. And he said she has tumors in her liver and lungs. And from the moment I got home and saw her on the floor, and from the moment he said those words, it was approximately 6 hours. And that is how fast your life can change, because that's how fast our lives changed. Adrian did not go back to school, actually in school. I did not go back to work. And that was day one of her cancer journey.
Did you guys ever go into something like that where it was saying, I want to do everything because I only have a short amount of time left? Or was it because the pain was so significant she couldn't do that? How was all that?
I believe Adrian made a bucket list that she never showed me, because for me to move forward and to be the caretaker I needed to be for her, I had to live in a very healthy state of denial. I mean, I knew deep down that she wasn't going to make it, but I could not let that come to the surface at all. I could not allow it in any way, shape, or form. But Adrienne decided there were things she wanted to do, and she made them happen. And she was the driver and the force behind everything that she wanted to do. She got to meet her favorite musician, Dave Navarro, from Jane's Addiction on The Tonight Show. She and her
Wow.
boyfriend got 8 tickets to The Tonight Show. We only
Wow.
needed 3. We got 8. And they did that. I had nothing to do with that. And, you know, and her Make-A-Wish Day and everything that she wanted to do was absolutely on her. And I only assisted when she asked me to do that. And the only thing that she didn't get to do that she really wanted to do was go on the Montel Williams show. She loved Montel Williams. We always watched him when she was in the hospital. And by the time they called, the producer did call, she was just too sick to travel across the country because we were in LA. That show was actually taped in New York. And I didn't feel
Oh,
good
okay.
about flying across the country. She was just too weak. But they did call.
Wow, that's really incredible. I want to talk about this. This again, this is Andrea Wilson. She wrote a #1 best-selling book. It's Better Off Bald: A Life in 147 Days. You talk about what made you get up and say, you know, after such a stressful and life-changing event happens where you do lose somebody that's so close to you. It's not even just losing a sister. For you, it was like losing a child because you took care of her for so many years. How did you get through that struggle? Because, obviously I'm sure you had to clean up her room. I know you spoke a lot about reading her diary and and that's got to be like really incredible reading all of her thoughts and all of her belongings. So how did you get through all that struggle and pick yourself up from your bootstraps rather after all that?
Oh, Rob, that's the next book.
Okay.
um, the first year I really faked it. The first year I didn't want other people to worry about me, so I did what anyone wanted me to do. I went to parties. I planned my best friend's 30th surprise birthday party. I really did just do what other people wanted me to do. And then a year at the anniversary of her death, I was sort of done. I mean, I was done, and I was devastated, and I was tired of pretending like I wasn't devastated. And but I knew I had to channel my grief. And so my thought was, well, I'm just going to volunteer for the largest nonprofit dedicated to liver disease, and I
Yeah.
won't say who they are because everyone can figure it out. And I will volunteer and I will help liver cancer patients and caregivers. And I called them, and they said no. And I was like, no, what do you mean no? And they did not do anything liver cancer at that time. And I spoke to the head of the Greater Los Angeles chapter, and I said, well, no problem. My background is writing and marketing. I will create a program for you. You do not have to pay me. I want to do this. And they said no. And I was shocked because I knew liver cancer was just going to keep going up in the country based on what I knew about its causes. And so, I hung up the phone and I was like, wow. And then I did more research, and it was not a single organization in the US was doing that. That's when I realized, okay, so I have to do something about it.
Can you talk about that? Do you believe that that journal,
Mhm.
which is still online, is really helping people, still throughout the world, even that are going through a tough
I like to
time
think
in
it
their
is,
lives?
and I think that that's what makes the structure of the book unique. I mean, I did write it like a journal because Adrienne was a writer, and she kept a journal that she started before she got sick, but she kept writing in it. And I was never allowed to see that journal, and I didn't read it until after she died. And I kept a medical journal. And so with the book, you get to see both points of view. And there's this moment about 3/4 of the way in where I think she's getting better, and she knows she's getting worse. And I think that's, again, kind of a pivotal moment, the difference between a patient who can feel it in their bodies versus a caregiver who's only seeing it from the outside. But yes, I did meet this young woman who was visiting the US from Sweden for a holiday, she said, and she'd always planned to visit Los Angeles, but she had read Adrienne's live journal online, not knowing Adrienne had died, read it from beginning to end, and had promised herself that when she finally made it to LA, she was going to visit Adrienne's grave. And I happened to run into her, and it was amazing. So, and that's not the only time something like that has happened, where total strangers have visited her grave.
Well, I want to talk that to me, that's almost like fate that even God wanted that to happen.
Mhm.
You running into that girl and she's came all the way from
I know.
Sweden, that's like something incredible that's out of a movie. You talk about the sketch of the Hollywood sign in the cemetery. Can you tell the viewers about that? Because that's something that is really incredible, I thought, too.
Yeah, I won't go into how we ended up at the cemetery because that's pretty unique story too. But Adrian's buried in Hollywood Forever Cemetery. It's a somewhat famous cemetery in the middle of Hollywood, and you don't even know it's there. I've driven by it, so many times. I had no idea it was there, but that's where she's buried. And from her grave, you can see the Hollywood sign. And it's gonna, you see all these trees, and then in the distance you see the Hollywood sign up. It's up in the mountains if you've never been to Los Angeles. And when I was, to your point, cleaning out her room, going through her things, she was, in addition to being a writer, she was an artist. And so she always had sketches, always had stuff everywhere. And I found this sketch of, of these trees and a view of the Hollywood sign and the mountains. And it's the same view from her grave.
Yeah,
And she had titled it Future.
that's
And
really incredible.
yeah.
Just a few more questions. Do you feel like with reading that journal, I know it took you a little bit of time to really focus and read on that journal. Do you feel like it was kind of because of what you had said before that you were in denial about what had happened, I guess? And you can correct me if the terminology is wrong about that. But I guess what I'm trying to say, was it really hard or was it helpful to read her journal and bring back all those good memories and obviously some bad memories of what had happened throughout Adrian's life?
Well, I didn't read the journal initially, because she didn't want me to, and I was respecting her privacy. But when I finally did, I read it, bits and pieces at a time. And it was both delightful and difficult. I mean, her humor comes through, and she could always make me laugh, and she's so funny. And but it was also difficult to, hear her talk about the pain and people not understanding, and how she had no hope, how she was ready to give up. That part was really, really hard to read.
That's really tough. I want to talk about this with, so many special things in that book. And, we talked throughout this interview about, people from Sweden, people from all over the world. This journal is still online. And also,
Mhm.
obviously, the book has so many powerful moments in it. And it's written, as you said, like a journal. What do you want people to learn from this book and to put in practice in their own lives?
I want people to learn just how fast life can change, how quickly, and it doesn't necessarily have to be cancer, but I mean, life can just change on a dime. And so the most valuable thing we really have is time. And so to really remember and be grateful for that, but also don't let anything stop you from anything you want to do, no matter how small or how big it is. And that's why I named the book what I did, is because I really feel like when Adrienne got that diagnosis, I think she could feel how bad it was in her body and knew she probably wasn't going to get better. And she took that time and immediately was like, okay, these are things I want to do with my life, and just check them off one at a time. And so if we could all live like that, and it's just look at each day as an opportunity to do something that we really want to do, I think we'd be happier people.
Great. Last question on the book before we get into your organizations. What do you want people to learn most after they read the book about Adrienne and her story?
Well, I'm so proud of Adrienne because during that entire time, she never said, "Why me?" And in my head, I was always, "Why her? Why her?" And um, she had so much courage and dignity and grace and humor, and that's how I measure my life now, and how I try to live my life every single day. Um, and I hope she inspires people. I hope they're really inspired by her. And those are some
Really?
of my favorite reviews to read, is that people are inspired by her.
All right. So can you speak about the nonprofit Blue Fairy, the Adrienne Wilson Liver Cancer Association?
Sure. So, Blue Fairy's mission is to prevent, treat, and cure primary liver cancer, specifically hepatocellular carcinoma. That's what Adrian had through research, education, and advocacy. We were founded in Burbank, California. Oh my goodness, over 15 years ago now, and we've really started to grow in the last 5 years. We are still a primarily volunteer-driven organization. We have a fantastic board of directors, medical advisor. We're really working hard to raise awareness and be supportive of liver cancer patients and caregivers.
I want to talk about you. You obviously are involved with the Cancer U. What happens there, and what is it about?
Sure. So Cancer U is my fairly new endeavor. It's a for-profit social benefit health tech startup. And Cancer U is an online membership platform. It's for all cancer patients and caregivers, so it's not specific to a certain type of cancer. And to educate and empower them to become advocates for themselves during their cancer journey with two big goals. One is to improve outcomes and also to reduce cost. So our business model is B to B to C. Our end users of the platform are cancer patients and caregivers, but our actual customers are payers, pharmaceutical companies, and providers.
We speak a lot about, this talks about cancers on TV all the time. We see the commercials about donations. Obviously, with Adrian and liver cancer, obviously that's extremely important to you. Have you saw any breakthroughs on as far as liver cancer goes since your sister has passed
Rob,
away?
did you do some research? You did, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really happy to say that when Adrian was diagnosed, there was nothing for advanced stage liver cancer. And it's usually diagnosed in later stages because our livers don't have any pain receptors. That's why you don't typically feel pain. So yes, especially in the past 2 to 3 years, there have been a lot of drugs coming on the market for advanced stage. Patients are living longer. They're living healthier, happier lives with fewer side effects. So it's very promising. There's still not a cure if you're in the advanced stage. I mean, the best way to cure liver cancer is to catch it super early and to cut out the tumors from the liver because the liver is actually the only internal organ we have that regrows. It's a pretty incredible organ when you learn more about it. But there have been a lot of great drugs that are on the market, coming to market, and more available for patients.
But is liver cancer hereditary, or is it more so because, her getting at such a young age at 15, is that usual or?
No, she was as far from the typical patient, especially at that time, as you could get. That the typical patient was a non-North American male over the age of 50 at that time.
Wow.
Liver cancer is actually highly preventable for the most part. It kind of falls into 3 categories. Either it's caused by your environment, so that can be exposure to toxins. In Asia, there's an aflatoxin, a fungus that they believe causes liver cancer. Lifestyle choices for sure. So I think most people associate alcoholism with liver cancer, which leads to cirrhosis, which can lead to liver cancer. Obesity now is becoming one of the causes. And then the most common causes in the US and other countries is viral. So either hepatitis B or hepatitis C. They are both viruses of the liver. And when the doctor saw what they did in Adrian's biopsy, they were so shocked that they tested her for hepatitis B and C,
Yeah.
and she had both. And because of her age, because she had never been out of the US, and because of our history, they determined that she got Hep B and Hep C from our mother during childbirth. And Adrian was born in 1986. And at that time, Hep C had not even been identified or even taken out of the blood supply. Testing mothers for Hep B was not standard of care. So she was a nurse, which is also, healthy. The vaccination for hepatitis B had not been invented yet. So all those years, Adrian had those 2 viruses, and we didn't know it. We had no idea.
Wow. What do you hope to accomplish with Cancer U and your nonprofit?
With my nonprofit, Blue Fairy, our goal from the very beginning was, let's put ourselves out of business. Let's get to the point where there's a cure, kind of like with polio, and we're not needed anymore. Like we're gone. And I've threatened all the researchers and doctors I know. I was speaking at this conference a few years ago, and I told them, I said, look, guys, I only have this many years left to live. So this is how much time you have. So, that's what we want to do. Let's get to the point where we're not necessary anymore. So even these drugs coming on the market in the last couple of years for liver cancer is incredibly exciting. For Cancer U, the goal is that when you hear the words, you have cancer, whether it's you or it's your spouse or your child or a parent, the next words out of the doctor's mouth will be, but we have a partnership with Cancer U. Let's get you enrolled today. We want to meet people at that moment of diagnosis, because that is when you have the chance to make the biggest impact. And to use my sister as an example, we were in Los Angeles. We had access to the, some of the best and top hospitals in the country. She was seen at one of the top children's hospitals in the country. But from the day she was diagnosed, the best option for her would have been a clinical trial. And no one brought that up to me. And I didn't know to ask. And by the time clinical trials were discussed, it was too late. And her immune system was just wrecked. So we want to meet people at that moment of diagnosis where it's a given that, oh yeah, you get to join Cancer U now. Welcome to the club. Here you go. But here's how we're going to help you. And we're going to teach you how to handle this, what to ask, how to make these decisions, give people the tools. It's one thing just to give someone a piece of paper or a brochure. It's totally different to teach them how to use that information.
About a lot in the country right now about affordability for health insurance and healthcare. You at such a young age taking care of Adrian, with those kind of issues at 15. I mean, that had to be extremely expensive, with chemo and all the hospital visits and all the time rather she had been in the hospital. How did all that work?
I'm going to answer your question, so stay with me for just a second. So
yeah, no worries.
The joke among my friends is that the day I find someone more organized and detail-oriented than I am is the day I find my personal assistant for life, okay? And so if you're out there, please reach out to me. And I am. I'm really detail-oriented. So when I got custody of Adrian, I looked over the law, the California law. In California, Medicaid is called Medi-Cal, is what they call it. So. Yeah. And I was making too much, it looked like, for Adrian to qualify. But I read every single line of information, and it turned out there was a loophole. And the loophole is that if a child lives in California, but they're not living with a biological parent, and they have a legal guardian, but that legal guardian has not yet adopted the child, then that child is considered a ward of the state and gets full medical coverage.
Wow,
so
that's great.
I applied, and this is long before she got sick, I applied for health insurance for Adrian, and she was fully covered. And it's why I didn't adopt her, actually. The only way to keep her covered was not to adopt her. And so I didn't have health insurance for myself, but I did for her.
What advice would you give these people that are struggling, and whether it's medical or jobs, whatever it may be, and do have those struggles in their life right now and have lost hope? What advice would you give those people?
I've seen too many people isolating themselves because they think they have to, because that's what we've been told to do, to stay home. And even if your immune system is compromised, there are ways for you to spend time with people. And I'm not talking about 6 feet social distancing. There are ways to spend time with people and do it in a way that you can protect your immune system. And we had a very simple 3-step process when you came into our house with Adrian. Every single person who came into our house had to do it. A pediatric nurse taught us how to do it. And even when her white blood cell count was low, so her immune system was compromised, we let people come over and visit her. We did. We didn't want her to feel isolated or alone, but we went to these measures to make sure she was safe. And the whole time Adrian had cancer, she only got one cold. She never got pneumonia. She never had any other sort of infection. And meanwhile, there were kids that almost never left the hospital because chemo would be done and boom, they would get an infection. And, don't isolate yourself. Just because the government says you have to doesn't mean you need to, especially in your own home, and surround yourself with positive people.
So, Andrea, what would you tell people that do have those compromised immune systems?
Someone's coming to visit you. When they come into your home, you have a bleach water mix, a little squirt bottle, and they spray the bottom of their shoes, and they do not take off their shoes. They immediately go and wash their hands thoroughly, 30 seconds, happy birthday twice, whatever you want to sing. After they wash their hands, they also put on hand sanitizer. And they don't touch any doorknobs in your house. And just in case after they leave, because of course if they have to go to the bathroom, they're going to touch a doorknob, you wipe down all the doorknobs. The other thing we did with Adrian was we did not allow any small children to come into the home except for one child, John's son, whom we knew. Unfortunately, the house we were renting was for sale, and so we had strangers traipsing through our home to see the house, and we set a firm boundary with the property manager and said, okay, you can show the house, we have to be here. And we made people go through this process, and they could not touch doorknobs, but we were very firm and said, no kids can come into this house, no way, because kids are these little germ
Yeah.
they just are, they attract germs.
Right.
And those simple things that a pediatric nurse taught us to do, I truly believe, is what kept her so safe. We
Wow.
really just kept it simple.
Best-selling author Andrea Wilson Woods, and she's talking here about her book, Better Off Bald, A Life in 147 Days. And I want to end the interview with this. Can you tell people where they can find more about you, Andrea, and also how they can help out your organizations?
Sure. So Blue Fairy is bluefairy.org, BLUEFAERY. And Cancer University is cancer.university, so not a .com. And to find out more about the book or to reach me on any social media, just go to betteroffbald.com, so the name of the book, and that is BALD, betteroffbald.com. And would this be a good time to give you the gift for your listeners?
Yeah. Oh, I almost forgot. Good thing you remember that.
Okay, so we want to give your listeners a lifetime membership to Cancer U. It's really ideal if you're a newly diagnosed cancer patient or the caregiver of one. So when you go to cancer.university, you just click apply now. It'll take you to the application. You fill it out. Scroll to the bottom. You're not going to pay. You just click on it and it'll come down to drop down. I have a coupon code, and you're going to enter the coupon code FIRE Rob, all one word, all caps. So that's all you do. It'll waive that fee completely, and we would love to have you inside of Cancer U.